Hey guys, and welcome to Wildstar. This is Wormeck. I'm going to be taking a look with you at amps and tier points and giving a brief explanation on what exactly those are. Now, both of those are elements of the character customization and tweaking that you can do in the game. These are non-visual changes, they actually affect the gameplay. And they're both kind of similar in a way. They both make up, each of them is essentially a half of a more traditional talent system that you'd find in games like World of Warcraft or other similar MMOs. First things first, let's take a look at what those are. So, we'll start with ability tiering since that's more straightforward. Each of your abilities, as you see, has this little bar here that gives you, this essentially is the amount of points that you can put into them. So each point along the way will give you a benefit. For example, on my quick draw ability here, as you can see, I can't mouse over it, but just beneath the gray text, tier upgrade, normal plus 14 damage per shot. Ignore surge, that's a class mechanic, so not every class will have that. But basically it means that every time I put a tier point into this currently, it gives me 14 damage extra per shot. This scales up obviously as you level and that kind of thing, and that goes for each point. So this is 14, another 14, another 14, etc. Now once you get to certain milestones, like at level 25 and at 45, you get the ability to put enough points to tier it up to a new kind of special ability. This actually modifies the way that the abilities will actually work, which kind of greatly changes some of the skills and makes them more, or in some cases, less useful depending on what exactly your objective is with them. For example, if you look at Quick Draw again, the lower text on the bottom, at Tier 4, the major upgrade at level 25, every time I land a hit, it grants me swiftness for 1 second, and it conveniently tells me that swiftness gives me movement speed by 20%. The Tier 8 upgrade is when I finish channeling it, I get an Empower for 6 seconds, doesn't work outside of combat so you can't preload it, and an Empower gives me assault power of 10%. So every ability in the entire game works that way, including all the healing and tanking abilities all have their own special upgrades as well. The utility skills, most of those will increase the duration or change the effects somewhat. Path abilities, however, do not. Path abilities are just straightforward, but every other ability in the game does have these things. So how do you get them? Well, it's pretty simple. You just level up. Every level from 10 on, you get 1 tier point that lets you play with, and these tier points are variable per loadout. For example, on this loadout, I have another set that I can customize, so you don't have to worry about spending them on the wrong loadouts. They're fully customizable as well. You can easily, whenever you want, just take the points out and say I no longer want that, and I want to put them here. I can definitely do that. There's nothing stopping you. There's no points cost or penalty for respeccing. You obviously can't do it mid-combat because that would be a little bit silly, but anywhere else you are good to go. So next up, we're going to take a look at amps. Amps are a little bit more complicated. They're kind of the more advanced, kind of passive behind-the-scenes stuff that takes place on all your skills. You can find those just at the amps section on the top of your bar here. These are available from level 6 on. Now this is the amp screen, which is a little bit confusing at first glance, and you might be wondering what the hell. Can't really blame you. It's not super obvious initially the way that this kind of system works, but essentially it actually is fairly simple once you understand it. Basically, you're divided up into these different sections here. So this is the assault section, the hybrid assault support, hybrid support utility, and hybrid assault utility. Each of these, initially, you only start with the first tier, which is the center section. As you can see over here on my support section, I only have these ones available to me. And the rest of them are locked with blue locks. The blue locks just mean you have to spend the previous point, so if I was to spend, which I won't do, if I was to spend a point here, I'd unlock this and I could move up there. Now the second tier here, you'll notice I have one filled in here currently. These essentially you have to have a prerequisite. In this case, for these tiers, you have to have spent at least 4 points in the tier 1 to unlock the tier 2. They don't carry over between sections, so I guess actually it's only 3, my mistake. So once you spend 3 points here, I have my tier 2 unlocked for hybrid assault support now, so I would be able to put a point into preparation. The catch is that they don't all cost 1 point. The first tier all does. The rest of them are a bit more variable. Most of the tier 2 stuff is 4 points, as you can see here in the lower left of the tooltip on the right side of the screen. Power cost 4. It means I need 4 points to get that. That's not cheap. Luckily, that means that once you put a point into any of the skills in your tier 2, you unlock the tier 3. Tier 3 in the assault, support, and utility trees all includes in one unlocked by default. So that's what this gray icon is here. That means that I have actually learned the amp. More on that in just a minute. But basically, those three are special abilities that are tied as core kind of skills for specializing far enough into a tree. So, for example, as a spell slinger, my assault path I get Assassinate, support path I get Healing Torrent, and utility gives me Void Pact. Each of these do their own things, and you can see more about what those actually do when you look at your abilities list. They're all available for display there, whether they're unlocked or not. You just can't obviously use them. So that kind of lets you know whether you want to prioritize actually learning those or not. Some cases you may not, depending on if you actually need to use the ability regularly or not. Other times it may just not be good, it may just not fit your style. You may want to specialize more in a hybrid section or partway up your main one and then go into a hybrid or another line for whatever reason. But basically that's how that works. So that's kind of the core of how that system works. Now, I mentioned earlier that you have to learn these amps. What did I mean by that? Well, it's pretty simple. As you can see, most of the amps currently have a red symbol for me. The ones that have a gray, as I mentioned, are already learned and unlocked. That doesn't mean that they're working, obviously, you have to still put the points in them, but it means that I can put points in them. The red ones, even if I wanted to, if I had the 4 points, I wouldn't be able to put points in here. As you can see, it's still locked out even though I have access to this tier. The ones that aren't, you get mostly from an amp item. Now, these amp items are found a little bit all over the place. Some are drops, some are available from vendors, some are obtainable through questing. In fact, you get usually your first amp, unlockable amp, I should say, from a quest fairly early on within the first 10 levels, and that can kind of give you an idea of how it goes, and then you get a bit of a tutorial in terms of how amps actually kind of work and how you can earn them. The game doesn't really give you much direction on where and how and the specifics. It just kind of tells you you can get amps. And the amps that you obtain are a little bit up to luck if you aren't aware of what you need to be doing to get them. Certain amps, of course, are also considerably better for certain classes, so you may need to do a little research to figure out which ones you want to prioritize. Obviously, you can also do your own research and evaluate which ones you want to focus on getting on your own. Now, my setup here is a little bit different because I actually have a mod installed currently, an add-on, sorry, that I would strongly recommend to most people of the game. There's not really a reason not to get this. It doesn't kind of spoil anything. It just makes it so that you have the possibility of obtaining things without paying ludicrous prices. The main reason right now that a lot of people are having trouble with amps is that they're buying them from the commodity market. The commodity is kind of a player versus player, not versus, but well, in a way it's versus, I guess, because you're competing against people, so yeah, it's versus. But it's a player auction house, but not for all items. It only works for commodities, so trade goods, amps, and that kind of thing. So people will get amps and sell them on there. At the moment, there's a lot of people that are buying the amps from vendors and then selling them because people don't know better and they don't know where to get them and that you even can get them, because the game doesn't do a good job of telling you that. Now, what the Amp Finder mod does is, if you click it, you get this little box here, and it tells you in each zone what mods are available, where to get it, and if I go to, for example, it's not a good example, but if I go to Celestion, again, because I'm not in the zone, normally it'll give you an arrow showing you what direction to go to be able to actually turn in and find the vendor, and it tells you what the actual things are, as well as the reputation that you need for all the different attributes. Things like checking out your capital city. This is all for prestige, so it gives you a bit of an idea as to what you need to do, and you can kind of check these out, mousing over any individual one as well on here. This add-on does add the description to the location to the description. As you can see, for example, Trigger Fingers is locked. It may be for sale at the Commodities Exchange in Fortune's Ground Thade. Doesn't really help me. Unfortunately, this is one of the ones that you can't get anywhere but from a drop, which kind of sucks because it's a little bit important for my class, but that's how the cookie crumbles. Every class will have something probably similar, or certain things that will be more desirable that you can't get more easily. But at least a good portion of the amps are obtainable through vendors. And that's kind of a good thing, because you can also check out the quests here, and for example, these are the ones that I'd be able to do if I did these things, so I could get those and unlock them through there. And this works for each different zone. In Whitevale, this is the vendor stuff, and there should be another, no, there's not, so it puts the kind of brackets, I guess, around the ones that are completed, I suppose. I thought I'd completed other zones, or not, I thought I had, but I guess I didn't. And so I would really recommend that mod. It's just called Amp Finder. It's really worth it. It's one of the only 2 mods that I'm currently using. The other one is not super important, but it is definitely beneficial. That will make your life a lot easier, especially when you're looking for that one particular thing. It's possible you can get it somewhere really, really simple, and you'll save yourself a lot of gold, potentially a lot of platinum, because prices are a little insane right now. They'll stabilize over time, but that you have it. One thing I didn't mention about the amps in particular is that unlike tier points, there is a cost associated for this, so you can respec down at the bottom. You don't need to go to a specific NPC, you don't have to do anything fancy, you just click the button, but it does cost you money. And the costs are, they're not ludicrous, but it's not something that you would want to constantly be doing either. Now you do have separate action sets that do have their own set of points, so you can spend your points however you want. As you see here, this is my healer set, so I'm going more down the support line, of course, and this is my DPS set, so I'm going more down assault. So you can kind of flex it out. Obviously the way that I kind of set up my points here is not really ideal. Eventually I will have to respec this, but since I didn't really have much worth putting points into, I don't particularly mind doing this for now, and then later on I'll just redo it. It's not a super big deal in my opinion. But yeah, so that's it for our look today at amps and tier points. Hope you enjoyed the video, and if you did, please feel free to comment below. I'd love any feedback that you might have to give, and until next time, it's Wormeck out. This is where he starts getting a little bit more annoying because it starts jumping around like a jerk. And it's a little bit more unpredictable. It's harder to avoid than some of his other attack sequences, and then they also start spawning these things.